Okay, this is very exciting. Welcome, everybody, to the first in what's hopefully a long series of CAS Worldwide podcasts, introducing many of our professional solution providers, experts in their fields that are going to help us and guide us through many of the obstacles of business. And today we have the world famous, the one, the only, Eliud Custodio of Turn One Studio. And so, Eliud, welcome, and it's nice to have you here today.
Well, thank you, Jamie. I appreciate being here. World famous. That's a lot to live up to.
Well, listen, I guess in the world of sales, we exaggerate a little maybe, but we won't. You like that? A nice slap in the face there. Okay. Eliud, you are a marketing expert, and I've chosen you today as our first podcast because I figured that, well, one, you know what you're doing with a podcast, and two, by doing this podcast, you're actually educating us in what it is that you're educating us in. Does that make any sense?
That makes sense, and that's fair. I'm a proponent of practicing what I preach when it comes to marketing, and yeah, I guess this is that.
I like it. That's a great way of practicing what we preach. We say the same thing here at CAS. So if any of you don't know, CAS is a consulting firm specializing in internal process improvement. We work with companies assessing their vulnerabilities and risks, and we offer remediation and implementation to solve those. And I want to welcome again Eliud today, because Eliud's going to talk to us about podcasts, marketing, advertising, web design. I got a whole list of things. But first I have to ask you, Turn One Studio. Now, I know the answer because I checked your website, but why don't you tell us, where in the world did you come up with the name Turn One Studio?
Well, I certainly encourage everyone to check my website and see for themselves as well. But in short, I'm a big Formula One fan. I'm a big car guy in general, but when it comes to motorsports, I'm a big Formula One fan. So one of the things that I learned watching Formula One over the years is while it's important to have good grid placement at the start of the race, which is determined by qualifying the day before, where you start doesn't necessarily forecast where you finish. A lot of stuff happens, and a lot of stuff happens at the beginning of the race very often. And this is anecdotal, but I've noticed a lot of things happen within the first turn of a race, especially depending on the circuit. So if you are adequately prepared for the action in turn one, that can have a significant impact on how you finish the race. So I have metaphorically made that connection with marketing and the importance of getting stuff done the correct way at the beginning to position yourself for success.
Interesting. I've always wondered, you watch track and field, and they have the staggered line, where, the guy on the outside in the wide lane starts early. I always thought the guy in the short lane, the inside, he was like always running from behind. And of course, amazing around the turn, he moves ahead. Of course, on the other side is, I think of the Kentucky Derby, and they all line up, and that poor horse was on the outside. So it's interesting you say it. So where you start many times really indicates where you finish.
Yeah.
All right. So where do you start? So let's say I've got a new company and I'm looking to grow my business. Where do I start?
Well, we start with a conversation. There is no one size fits all when it comes to how to market a company. There are countless tactics you can employ, but they're really just tools in the toolbox. Tactics without strategy they're just tools in the toolbox. You need to know how to use those tools and how to use them together. So it always starts off with a conversation about your company, about your goals. I would like to know, if I have the privilege of working with said client, I would like to know more about how they operate, more about how their products work, what their audience is, what they like their audience to be, and what's been areas of success thus far. So it starts off with a conversation. But generally speaking, it's important to have a good look. It's important to have a lot of good things, but I think you need a certain amount of polish when you start a business. You're a professional and you should have a good look about you. So aesthetics are important to me. And that's something I always like to talk to clients about: a strong logo, a strong website. Um, yeah, I can't think of any industry where not having a website makes sense. And it's not just a matter of having the right it's not a matter of having a website, it's having the right website, having the right aesthetic. I always remind people, you know, in our careers, when we go for job interviews, we always make it a point to look good, to present ourselves in the best possible light. And the truth of the matter is, unless you're a fashion model or somewhere where clothing is actually part of the business, how you dress doesn't necessarily translate into your ability to do the job that you're applying for. But we all do it. And why do we do it? We do it because first impressions count. As they say, you only have one shot to make a first impression. And while we intellectually understand that on our person, we sometimes forget that our business needs to have the right clothing as well, and needs to make that right first impression. So, starting off with that conversation, and then assessing how they are presenting themselves in the marketplace is a common way to start a relationship.
So right off the bat, you're really hitting on that first cylinder of turn one.
Right.
You're saying, yeah, right out of the bat, it's got to be right, and that first turn really matters. In looking at some stuff, you wrote something about don't be afraid to outsource. You want to talk about that for a moment?
Yeah, sure. So outsourcing is defined in many different ways. What I'm going at with that comment, and you may be referring to a blog post that I wrote or a video that I produce. I produce a lot of content that helps small businesses understand how marketing works and gives them some good tips and advice. The idea behind not being afraid to outsource, in short, is understanding that what it is that you do, whether you are an attorney or a chef or an accountant, you're in business to do what you do because you're an expert at that. But as business owners, we all know that there are a lot of other things that surround operating a business that go beyond what our specific skill set is. If, for example, if you did run a restaurant, that doesn't necessarily mean your skills are adequate for bookkeeping or accounting or marketing, for that example. And you shouldn't be afraid to find help outside of your comfort zone to bring your business to the next level. It's sometimes a fool's errand to think that, well, if I do this myself and I do that myself and I do this myself, that I will save all of that money. And, penny saved is a penny earned, right? So if I do all those things and save all of that money, I'll be able to advance my business faster. That's more often than not incorrect. And sometimes it feels counterintuitive. But the truth of the matter is there are experts in their field, and while there's a cost associated to employ those experts to help you in your business, you're going to get to the finish line much faster because you're not wasting all the time discovering and getting over those mistakes and hurdles that the professional in that area, in that space, has already gone through. Does that make sense?
As a matter of fact, it does. And I heard a line many years ago from when I was younger, from an older gentleman who had been doing this for a long time. And he said, I've been doing this so long, I've seen everything twice. And I think that's what you're talking about is, you talk about the real estate broker who tells you that, I bought 12 homes last year. I sold 12 homes. I've sold 120 homes over the last 10 years. I've seen all the pitfalls to it. Or I like to say the travel agent who has the access to the information and the technology to make your vacation right. We used to always say back in my travel days is, you can book any cruise you want, but using a travel agent, they have the knowledge of which cruise lines would fit you best or which you would fit best into. And I think that's what you're saying is, as an expert, you've got that knowledge. You've seen that once, twice, multiple times. And so you're not going to fall into those pitfalls. You're not going to make those mistakes. Whereas I, as a new entrepreneur who hasn't had to do my own marketing, is now starting to create these things, and I'm just fumbling over myself. I'm making rookie mistakes that are costing me without me realizing it. And in this case, you come along and you can avoid all of those. And again, if I get myself out of the gate in the first turn in the right position, I'm going to go back to that over and over again. It makes sense.
I like that.
I do. Me too. I like that too. I'm going to keep that. Now, people say sales, others say marketing. I've done both. I've been usually failed at both, let's say, as opposed to usually successful. What's the difference between sales and marketing?
That's an excellent question. That's an excellent question because those two words are often paired together, sales and marketing. They're often paired together. I think that probably derives from more of the corporate space where you pair those two departments together, sales and marketing, and they're paired together because they work together. But the truth is, when you define the difference between sales and marketing, you are defining the moment in time where a customer is on their quote unquote journey from having a problem to solving that problem, assuming your product solves that problem, right? So when you're in a marketing position, you're courting the potential customer, the lead, the prospect early on in the cycle. To take it to modern day scenarios, let's say they're doing a Google search because they have a problem, or they're on YouTube trying to solve an issue for their business or their home or whatever. They're in that research phase. Sometimes they know what their problem is. Sometimes they kind of know what the problem is, but they don't know how to define it. That's early on in that sales funnel concept. During that time, when they go from figuring out what the problem is to looking for solutions for that problem, that's where marketing comes in. That's where marketers and companies have the opportunity to share the awareness of what they provide as far as solutions go, and educate the customer of what's available and what might be the right fit to solve their problem. Sales comes in after that. Sales comes in when it comes to making the decision of where to actually procure that solution. I now know what the solution is, and I now know the key players to solve that solution. That is thanks to marketing. Now, making them choose me over the other company, over my competitors, that's where sales comes in. So it's an education process, and then the salesmanship execution at the end to kind of close the deal.
You wrote something, and I've heard this many, many times. Marketing is a necessity, not a luxury. And I guess the old question was, and I forget who the famous advertising person who said, well, I'll use it with advertising. They'd say, when do you advertise? When your business is doing well and you've got money, or when your business is doing poorly and you don't have any money and you need more sales? So I'm saying advertising. I'm going to say marketing. Talk about that. Why is marketing a necessity and not a luxury? Well,
the reason why I like to point that out, by the way, is marketing is often an unsung hero. When marketing occurs, how do I best phrase this? It's harder to track the success of marketing. For example, let's say we are a car dealership, and someone comes in to buy a car. I'm their salesman. I sit them down at my desk and I get them to sign the lease paperwork. I sold the car. Well, I got the credit. I sold the car. That customer bought a car. They drove off with a car. However, what made them choose this dealership? What made them choose this brand? What made them choose this model? Maybe I had to show them a couple of models if they didn't do much research, but I mean, honestly, people usually have a general idea of the type of car they want to buy before they go to a dealership. No one shows up blind, right? So how many commercials did they see for this brand that I'm selling? Did they see any commercials for my dealership? Did they see any ads that I ran on Google? Did they see any of the social media content that I post talking about the specials that I'm running at my dealership? Are they aware of the service department that we have, and how buying a car is more than just buying the metal and the sheet metal and the tires? It's the full experience of why you would buy it from me. All of those questions are hard to answer. You're out there putting out that content, but we don't know with certainty how much marketing that particular person saw to convince them that we, the dealership, was the best solution for them at this moment. And that scenario happens across the board when it comes to marketing. It's very frustrating as a marketer. For the longest time, advertising is a component of marketing, right? It's not, they don't necessarily fight one another. It's just another tactic to a marketing strategy. So advertising for the longest time did very well, or comfortably adopted print advertising, running ads in magazines, doing direct mailers, that sort of stuff. And over the years, and I'm saying this from someone who spent a lot of years in magazine publishing, I witnessed the transition. We saw a massive transition from ad sales going from ink on paper to digital ads. And when that first started to happen in the context of magazine publishing and the news business, the assumption was, well, people don't want to pick up a newspaper or a magazine and read articles. They have iPads and iPhones for that, and that's what they're doing. And to a certain extent, some of that has happened. But what we learned shortly after was that really wasn't the motivator for the change in advertising. The truth of the matter is, even with the magazines that I worked with over the years, we never really lost circulation. The reader still wanted to read the content. They still liked getting a magazine, whether it's a tactile feel or whatever. There was nothing wrong with that from the readership perspective. What became wrong with that from the advertising perspective is that there was no way to track how an ad was performing. When ROI became more important, not that it ever wasn't important, but as it became more important and you couldn't quantify an ad purchase when it ran in a printed magazine, eyeballs from the advertiser perspective shifted online, because in theory, you could track where that stuff is coming from, where those leads are coming in from. You can put a 800 number on the bottom of your magazine ad, and if they call that number, if it was specific to the magazine you advertise in, well, then you can draw the line. Well, the ad dollar spent here yielded some sort of return. But that's very difficult in print. Online, it's a lot easier. You can track clicks. You could attribute that click to a ad campaign that you ran and calculate an ROI. It makes it easier for marketers at companies to protect themselves at the very least, and say that the ad dollars that they approved for this particular spend yielded X, and therefore they feel comfortable doing what they were doing. So when it comes to something like email, you commonly would A/B test two different subject lines, right? Because an email is only as good as when it's opened. Otherwise, if they don't open it, it doesn't matter what the content looks like. So you would test two different subject lines. You'd send a sample here and a sample there and see which was better. If you had a more passive versus more aggressive call to action in that subject line, if you were cute versus being a little more serious and more professional with your messaging, those sorts of things. So A/B testing is important because when you're doing marketing, especially when you're doing email marketing, because people are quick to unsubscribe and people get hit with junk mail all the time, it's important to be as effective as you can, because if you send enough messages to an audience that really doesn't care about what you're sending, they don't find value in what they're receiving from you, they're just going to unsubscribe, and then your database will reduce. And whether you like, as a consumer, whether you like receiving email promotions or not, the fact of the matter is, from a marketing standpoint, email still remains one of the most cost-effective ways to promote your business. So you really want to protect that list. You want to cultivate a quality list, but you want to make sure that you're treating your list the right way. And when you send something, you're getting the most bang for your buck. And that's where testing at least two email campaigns against one another could help you determine what's the right voice for your audience.
And that just reinforces what you were talking about again with digital marketing advertising, is you've got you've got means of measure, and you get immediate feedback. You know, and you get immediate response, like you say. If you send out an aggressive versus a non-aggressive email, and you see which one gets a greater response. Now,
digital marketing in particular, you know, it's very popular for a lot of reasons, one of which is the ability to track performance and stuff. But one of the issues that comes up when it comes to digital marketing is making sure that you're not only creatively executing correctly, but you're technically executing correctly. And when you were telling me about, you know, you're sending out messages and you're not sure if they're reaching the intended audience, and then them unsubscribing would be a way to say that they received it. What can commonly happen when you employ a third-party mail service like a MailChimp or Constant Contact or whatever, if you misconfigure how you set that up, your messages can easily wind up in the spam folder. For example, you have your Eliud@turn1studio.com email address. And when I use a third-party email program like MailChimp, they are sending on behalf of my domain, turn1studio.com. I don't want to get too far in the weeds here, but if you could follow me, what I'm trying to explain is a third party is trying to send email on behalf of the authority of my domain. If that is misconfigured on the domain level, spam filters will think it's junk mail, that someone is trying to spoof an email coming from your organization when they don't have the actual authority to. And there are technical things that have to be configured to make sure that that doesn't happen. That is something most DIYers would not know. And that's a great example of how you could be spinning your wheels, doing your own email campaigning and miss that. And while your content may be fantastic, it may be winding up in junk mail folders because you didn't have the technical knowledge behind the right way to digital market.
Is anybody seeing this? Is anybody reading this? And that's why an expert like you is so important, because if no one's seeing it because it's getting stuck in technology, then I'm just spinning my wheels in the mud and I'm getting nowhere. Okay. A couple of interesting things. In looking at your website, you do a lot of stuff.
I do.
You are, I started to rattle it off. Are you ready? Fasten your seatbelt. SMB marketing, e-commerce, video, consulting strategies, consultative strategies, graphic design, web development, photography, video production, social media management. And then I saw there was a more button and I just stopped. I couldn't know anything else. And there was, are you good at many things but great at nothing? What are you?
I am very good at a lot of things. And that's a weird thing to actually say because that sounds so conceited actually. But I feel comfortable saying that because the services that I offer, all of them dovetail. When necessary, I bring in talent on certain projects to handle certain areas of the project. But by and large, I do it myself. I've been fortunate to have a career where I've been able to do a lot of things. I've worked professionally. I've worked in environments where I worked with small businesses, and you know, it's inherent in the small business life to do a lot of things from a grassroots level. That's been a blessing as it's allowed me to learn a lot of things and help me develop those skills. So whether it's something that I do personally or something that I bring in talent for to work under Turn One Studio, if I'm not doing it personally and I'm bringing someone in, at least I know how it works, and it makes me better from a management standpoint to provide the best service because I'm not going in blind. But I've been shooting photography since I was a teenager. I went to school for graphic design. I was fortunate that my professor for this program that we don't really use much anymore, Quark Express, a graphic design layout program, she got me involved in HTML coding early on, and then I just kind of ran with that. So I've been producing websites, and I've had my own business doing that, as well as graphic design for nearly 25 years. And then professional, career-wise, Uh, I ran art departments for magazines. That gave me the opportunity to actually build an in-house video studio where we would produce videos on a weekly basis. I used to travel with those businesses and do remote shoots in hotels and whatnot to do interviews with executives and so on and so forth. So all of those skills I was able to hone my craft over those years because I was blessed with these opportunities to do so. All of these grassroots efforts allowed me to figure out how to do it and do it efficiently, cost effectively and efficiently with a skeleton crew. So I'm comfortable when I offer these services to my clients now because I've been doing all of them for so long.
I like that. I like how you say that they're not really different. They're all parts of the whole. They're all parts of the overall marketing campaign. Again, what's your greatest piece of advice to somebody?
I think the piece of advice I would give to a business owner is to stay open-minded and realize that they don't know what they don't know. It's important when you're marketing to have an understanding of your audience, but it's also true that you may not actually know who your audience really is. You may think that your audience is X, but with a little experimentation, you may find that your audience is in fact Y, right? There may be some surprises along your journey of being a business owner, and you need to be open to that. Things aren't always black and white. And even if you're right today that your audience is this, audiences change. And you need to keep an open mind and understand that you don't know what you don't know. Things change, and you follow best practices. You observe how your marketing efforts, at least in the context of what we're talking about, your marketing efforts, how they're performing, and you pivot accordingly.
There you go. There it is. Words of wisdom from one Eliud Custodio of Turn One Studio. If you want to know more about Eliud, you can contact me at www.casww.com. That is CAS Worldwide. And I'd be happy to introduce you and make a connection for you and Eliud. And of course, go on his website, which, Eliud, why don't you tell us your website?
Really web hard. Address, turnonestudio.com, all spelled out, TurnOne studio.com, and Turn One Studio at all the major social networks.
And get your swag. All right. Thank you, Eliud. And really, thank you very much for leading us off on our podcast. You'll have to tell me later if we did a good job or not. In the meantime, everybody, have a great day. I love it. Positive reinforcement. You have a great day.